So we'll be getting started in just a couple moments. I'll be serving as your scoping meeting facilitator, and we'll do some more introductions here in just a couple minutes. All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and begin to get started. Thank you all for being here and for waiting. We have a healthy number of attendees here today. My name is Andy Pendoli, and I'll be serving as the scoping meeting facilitator. And before we get too far into the program, excuse me 1 minute. I'm going to start recording on my computer here. And I'd like to also introduce our interpreter, Carmen Chavez, who will be providing some explanation for how any community members who would benefit from Spanish language interpretation, how can do that. Carmen.
Buenas tardes a todos. Estamos ofreciendo interpretación en vivo en español durante esta reunión. Si desea escuchar la interpretación en español, haga clic en el botón de Interpretation, interpretación, en la parte inferior a mano derecha de la pantalla de Zoom. Usted va a ver un icono, un globo, y ahí haga clic. Y si se está uniendo a través de la aplicación de Zoom por un smartphone, elija el idioma haciendo clic donde dice More o más. En esos 3 puntos a la esquina inferior a mano derecha de la pantalla, elija Language Interpretation, interpretación del idioma. Luego elija Spanish y haga clic en Done. Listo.
Okay, thank you, Carmen. Muchas gracias. So we are opening the interpretation feature right now. I want to give a little bit more explanation here momentarily. We'll make sure that anyone who needs to join the interpretation audio section of the webinar can do that right now. So let me go ahead and begin with a little bit more an overview of using the Zoom tools and format. First of all, as we just described, you can select a language choice of English or Spanish language to hear all the audio. The other feature we'll be using for you to be able to submit written comments here today during the scoping meeting is using the chat feature in Zoom. And so we would encourage you to use that to submit questions and comments in written form during this meeting. The other tool that's available to you if needed, if you prefer or need to speak over audio during the meeting, during the public comment period, which will be the majority of our time here today. If you use the raise hand feature, at the right opportunity, we will open up the audio for you to be able to speak over the audio. So those are the tools we'll be using today. So again, to summary, we are muting everyone during the presentation and during the public comment period. Again, if anyone needs to speak over audio, we will unmute you. But I do want to stress that what's most helpful for our project team is if you would submit your comments, your questions over the Zoom chat, because we have that, it's a written format in some respects, and we're able to capture more information at once using the Zoom chat feature. So we're also going to be striving today to answer as many questions in real time as we can during our meeting, and will be available to go as late as 2 p.m. today, depending upon the number of questions that come in. But I do also want to stress that even after the scoping meeting, as part of the process for documenting all the input that was received during the scoping period, that the city will, of course, be responding to all questions to the extent they can in written format as well. So know that that will be done in due time during this process. So with that, I'd like to introduce Heidi Von Bloom, and she is Deputy Director with the City of San Diego's Planning Department, and she's going to help to move us through explaining this process overall, the blueprint, the associated projects associated with this environmental impact report in the scoping process, and then we'll move into the public comment period. So after a relatively brief presentation. So Heidi, please take it away.
Thank you, Andy. Again, my name is Heidi Von Blum, Deputy Director in the Planning Department, and I first want to welcome everyone and say thank you for being here and taking the time to help us determine the scope of the environmental impact report for this exciting initiative. I'm joined at this meeting with our staff and project leads that you see as panelists here, who will also be available to listen and answer to questions and comments. First, what is Blueprint San Diego? Excuse me. What we aim to accomplish through Blueprint San Diego is to provide a data-driven framework that strengthens community planning by developing land use and mobility thresholds to guide future land use changes in a manner that is consistent with the city's housing, climate, and mobility goals. These future land use changes will be focused throughout the city, primarily located near existing and future transit. Blueprint San Diego will also include objective design standards that will ensure future development is compatibly designed and reflects the unique character of each community throughout our city. While the comprehensive approach is new, the principles and policies behind it are intended to directly implement the policies adopted by the City Council in the General Plan and Climate Action Plan. And it is also intended to help achieve the city's housing requirements by planning for more housing for more people in the right places. Housing people can afford and in places that align with the city's climate goals. Using modeling data to identify land uses needed throughout the city to achieve the city's mode share goals, meaning the land uses needed to see more people walking, biking, and riding transit to move around, will allow residents to engage and provide feedback on what the details of that look like with their particular community. The framework provided through Blueprint San Diego will ensure that development in our communities will lead to walkable, bikeable communities with good access to transit, with overall better infrastructure needed to ensure the vibrancy and success of the community. And Blueprint San Diego will identify this development framework equitably to ensure that housing opportunities are available throughout the city so that everyone can have access to opportunity and housing everywhere. With this framework, public input will be more critical than ever, as refined policies for shaping the community will become more concrete. Why do we need Blueprint San Diego? First, we need a blueprint for more homes for more people, homes that people can afford everywhere in our city, and we need to look at our city comprehensively to plan for this. As mentioned, we also need to plan for communities that are aligned with our climate goals so that people that live in these homes can easily and safely walk, bike, and take transit to get around. Planning in this manner also allows us to focus on preserving our open spaces as well. And we need housing everywhere so that we ensure that there is equitable access to parks, schools, and open spaces, as well as public spaces for the people that will live in the housing that we need as a city. Blueprint San Diego is a citywide initiative. It is a comprehensive look at land use intensities and identification for more housing and employment across the city, with a focus on housing in and near existing and future transit. The yellow areas shown on this map on the screen is the city's current transit priority areas within 1/2 mile of a high quality transit. These areas will change over time as new transit infrastructure comes online and more is planned, providing even more opportunities for equitable housing opportunities for everyone. Also highlighted on this map more specifically are the Mira Mesa and University Community Plan areas, as well as the Hillcrest Focus Plan area, since those community plans and focus plans will also be addressed through the Blueprint San Diego EIR. Specifically, the Mira Mesa Community Plan Update will address housing and employment growth by identifying mixed-use villages along transit corridors in Mira Mesa, Carroll Canyon, Sorrento Mesa, and Miramar employment areas. The plan update will also identify new public spaces, plan for trails where consistent with conservation policies and regulations, as well as the mobility network. The University Community Plan update is also currently underway and will address housing and employment growth by identifying areas for higher residential density and employment intensity near the Midcoast trolley stations and within transit priority areas. The plan update will provide urban design policies and supplemental development regulations to improve the pedestrian environment within mixed use and employment areas, and will look for opportunities to add public spaces within linear parks, trailhead pocket parks, plazas, and promenades. The plan update will also identify a connected trails network and dedicate additional city-owned property as open space. The Hillcrest Focus Plan amendment to the Uptown Community Plan will address land use, mobility, public space, and cultural resources for the broader Hillcrest and Medical Complex neighborhoods. The amendment will recommend multimodal improvements to strengthen connections within the community, provide urban design policies, identify areas for higher residential density and employment intensity near transit, identify public space and park opportunities to connect people to businesses, services, and places to recreate, and to preserve historic resources and celebrate the LGBTQ community. The California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, is a statute that requires state and local agencies to inform and disclose to the public and decision makers about the potential significant environmental effects of a project. This act also encourages public involvement and input. The notice of preparation is the beginning stage of the environmental review process. After the close of the notice of preparation public review period, the planning department will prepare the environmental impact report that will analyze the effects of this project. As described in the notice of preparation that many of you have probably read, an environmental impact report will be prepared for this project. The environmental impact report will identify the potential impacts of the project. And the environmental impact report process will also inform the Blueprint San Diego process by identifying changes that could be made to the program to avoid environmental impacts, or in the alternative, identifying mitigation measures and alternatives that would avoid or lessen the potential environmental impacts. The purpose of the environmental impact report is also to foster public involvement. The information in the environmental impact report will be used by the city's decision makers during the public hearing process and will help to inform decisions on the merits of the Blueprint San Diego program. While the environmental impact report itself does not recommend approval or denial of the project, it enables decision makers to make informed decisions on the underlying project being considered. The environmental impact report will also analyze whether any alternatives to the project would avoid or substantially lessen any of the significant effects of the project identified in the report, while also meeting the project objectives. An environmental impact report must identify an environmentally superior alternative. A no project alternative to assess the effects of approving the project versus the effects of not approving the project will also be addressed in this report. The notice of preparation that was sent out on July 19th, 2021 contains a brief description of the project, notifies responsible agencies and other interested parties that an environmental impact report will be prepared, and solicits input regarding the scope of this report. The notice of preparation is distributed for a 30-day public review period, which will end on August 18th, 2021. I will hand it back over to Andy, and thank you again to everyone for being here.
Thank you. We'll be hearing from Heidi probably a little bit more as we get into the questions, but I wanted to give a little bit more explanation about the purpose of the scoping meeting, in that it's really to gather public input on the scope of the environmental issues that should be covered in the draft environmental impact report. The issues that will be addressed in the draft EIR cover a wide variety of issue areas, such as transportation, air quality, sensitive resources, water quality, noise. And so if you think any particular issues should be covered, or if you have specifics regarding these issue topics that you would like to see addressed in the draft EIR, we want to hear that from you today in particular, but in the broader scoping period as well. The comments gathered through the notice of preparation, or NOP, public review period that we're in will be used to develop the scope and content of the program EIR. So there will be additional opportunities to provide feedback on the draft EIR once that has been released for public review. The review period will consist of an additional 45 days to review the draft EIR and provide feedback. There will also be opportunities to provide public feedback directly on the Blueprint San Diego project, as well as the ongoing community plans. So specifically related to Blueprint San Diego, there will be additional public meetings which are detailed on the Blueprint San Diego website, and I'll provide you that link in a little while. But please mark your calendars September 23rd and September 29 as a quick preview of that. And let's see, go to the next slide here. So here's an overview of the EIR public hearing process overall. So as you can see, we're currently at the beginning of the process. The notice of preparation was issued on July 19th, as you see here in the top left corner. And today's scoping meeting is the first step in determining the scope and content that will go into preparation of the draft EIR. So with the input received during the scoping process, the city will begin to prepare the draft EIR. As we mentioned, public review of the draft EIR will occur for approximately 45-day period, which is the second formal opportunity for public comment on the EIR, I should say. And of course, additional opportunities to provide feedback on the project itself will continue throughout the process. After public review of the draft EIR, the city will prepare the final EIR, which will include a response to any comments received during the formal draft EIR commenting period. Finally, the project along with the EIR will be presented at public hearings before the Planning Commission, the Council Committee, and City Council. These hearings will provide additional formal opportunities for public comment. The city also looks forward to engaging with the public at each step along the way outside of this more formal process as well. So specifically during this period, how to comment on the notice of preparation. There's two key ways to provide those comments. First of all, by email, and you can email to planningceqa@sandiego.gov, as you can see on screen in the green highlight. And one of our team members will put that in the chat as well, so you can copy that out shortly. You can also mail comments to the address on this slide to ensure that consideration of all the comments in preparation of the EIR. All comments must be provided by August 18th, so during the scoping period. So even with any comments and questions you may submit during this 2-hour meeting we're having today, we strongly request and encourage you to submit them, again, either by email or by the mailing address you see here as well. So, and those are now available in the chat, so you may be able to copy those out. And so more specifically though, as we noted, there are going to be, you can stay more in touch with each of the projects that are included in this environmental impact report process. So first of all, there's the Blueprint San Diego program. And then of course the individual pages, the web pages that the city hosts for the Mira Mesa Community Plan, the University Community Plan, and for the Hillcrest Focus Plan Amendment. All of these links you see on screen will be pasted into the chat box very shortly, so you can easily copy or click out of those to borrow those, to be able to access those sites, I should say. So with that concludes our overview presentation, and now we want to shift the balance of our time to public comment, receiving your comments and questions that I see are already coming in through the chat, so thank you very much for that. So again, if you wish to ask a question or state a concern over audio, you may use the raise hand feature in Zoom that's available, and I will call on you as soon as we can. But we also have a lot of comments that have come in over the chat box, as you can see in the green box on the right of your screen. That's the best way for us to receive all comments and questions, so definitely encourage that as well. So I think what we'll do is we will get started in starting to review and respond to questions that have started to come in overall. And let's see here. One of the things we'll be able to do as well, we have our team, they're starting to review all the comments that you've been submitting. As you can imagine, it takes at least a few minutes, a couple minutes by question to be able to collect response from the staff that are here today to be able to provide you whatever response we can today. But again, I do want to stress that we'll be providing more comprehensive, complete, the city staff will be providing more comprehensive, complete responses in written form at the conclusion of this scoping process. So as direct and clear as you can be related to what you would like to see included in the EIR, and with any reference to whether that's for Blueprint or the community plan updates or the Hillcrest Amendment, that would be very helpful as well. So good, so I wanna thank everybody for the comments starting to come in and questions. And I do a couple other points I do wanna mention. We'll be showing you, we're taking all of the comments and questions that are coming into the chat that you're providing now, which we really appreciate. We're posting those onto a digital whiteboard tool that we're going to be showing with you very shortly. So you can kind of see and track that we have received those questions and comments. And then also too, as I said, the staff will be answering over audio today during this meeting period as best they can. Any questions that they're able to do so at this time. So So good with that. Heidi, I think we've got plenty of questions coming in, which is great. I know we're doing some coordination and being able to confirm how we can answer those. I think we're still collecting some responses. Is that right, to some of those questions?
Yeah, I think a couple that I'm just kind of seeing come through the chat that I can start off by answering. There's a couple comments about the timing for the comment. So the comments for the notice of preparation are due on August 18th, but that is not the end of the public process. Those are just the comments on the types of environmental impacts you think should be addressed in the environmental impact report for the project. There will be other opportunities for public input on the Blueprint San Diego project itself, as well as on each of the community plan updates that we've mentioned here. If you go to the links on our pages, we specifically have future meetings identified for the Blueprint San Diego program that we will be hosting. And maybe I can ask one of our staff to put those dates directly into the chat here as well. We will also be preparing a draft environmental impact report for the Blueprint San Diego program, and there will be an additional 45-day public comment period to formally comment on the environmental impact report itself. There are also the opportunities to comment on the program throughout the process, up through the hearing process and ultimate adoption by the City Council. If you specifically go to the websites that you see up on your screen here as well, there's the option to sign up for additional updates. So if you heard of this meeting here today by word of mouth and you didn't personally receive a notice, you can sign up to receive future updates on any future meetings or notices or public hearings through those websites as well.
Very good, thank you. Great, so as we're generating, again, thank you for all the comments and questions coming in. We're starting to collect those and organize those, and we'll be doing some response to those as well. Let me give you a preview as the staff are getting those together. What I can share with you is, let me just change my screen share here briefly. Mentioned this kind of digital whiteboard tool. So we're starting to populate all the questions that you have been submitting and coming in, and including those here. And we'll include all the questions. Some may be more CEQA related, some may be less CEQA related, as they say, related to the environmental process. We'll make sure those are included. We're capturing all of those and including all of those. We're recording them on this digital whiteboard. We're recording them in the Zoom format itself. So we have a lot of redundancy for capturing all these comments and questions. So I do want to stress that for everybody. So we're starting to receive those and have those come in. And I think we've got some additional questions we can probably speak to. Heidi, it looks like there's a question, for instance, related to, given the COVID conditions, what sort of considerations being given to space in residential units, so people don't have to have the 6-foot distancing, with distancing increasing all the time, parking, transportation. So a lot of questions built in there. Do you have what are some initial response we could offer to that?
Yeah, with the pandemic, we saw a lot of need for additional public spaces. That's something that through each of our community plan updates, we will be addressing. One exciting change in our department that many of you may or may not know about is that we do now have dedicated infrastructure planners assigned to each of our community plan updates to be able to adequately plan for those. That's not something necessarily that would be addressed through the EIR, the Environmental Impact Report for the project, but definitely something that is included throughout the planning process.
Great. So I see, for example, another question that's come up is related to how the AR addresses water supply, for example, sewer that's being pumped into the ocean, for example. Or do those standards need to change? Where does additional garbage go? Are these certainly, doesn't sound like maybe those are answers you have offhand, but are these types of things that are studied in the environmental impact report? Is that
Yeah,
right?
so that's exactly the type of comments that we're looking to get through this scoping meeting, is to hear what your thoughts are on the types of impacts that we should be addressing in the environmental impact report as we prepare it. So thank you very much.
Great. Yeah, and hopefully that helps everybody sense too. Again, there may be that today we're not able to give a precise answer, or frankly, much of an answer in the moment during this meeting. But again, these are things that at minimum, city staff takes those in as part of this process to consider the range of topics and issues to be studied in the environmental impact report. So do rest assured that that's part of the process as well. Seth, did you want to chime in for some more thoughts?
Yes, thanks, Andy. And just to get back a little bit to the outreach for Blueprint San Diego, we have two community forums for Blueprint San Diego that have been scheduled, one for September 23rd, 2021, and the other for September 29th. One's in the afternoon and one's in the evening. The meetings will be the same, but we wanted to provide options for folks to attend those meetings as well. I'm going to put the link to Blueprint San Diego in the chat so that everybody can register for those webinars through that website.
Thank you. So
Thanks,
appreciate
Seth.
that. Yeah, it's really important. A perfect example that ongoing engagement and just, work on these plans, does occur in parallel to the environmental review process that is being initiated. So, just I changed the screen view a little bit just to show you also that specific comments you're submitting, really important to us, and we are recording those here as well onto the mural. We again have them as backup in the Zoom chat. If you've submitted it, we do see them and they've been received. So thank you for that. Good. So kind of moving through. Heidi, any other kind of specific reflections you have, and maybe any specific answers you're able to provide with any of the questions so far at the moment? Or
Yeah, I see a lot of questions regarding the scope of Blueprint San Diego. And so just to kind of try and summarize that over again, and also encourage everybody to attend our sessions that Seth just mentioned later in September. But the purpose of Blueprint San Diego is to identify appropriate areas for residential and employment intensities throughout the city. Again, really focusing those decisions on a more comprehensive manner to align with our climate goals, focusing it closer to transit, and with a focus on creating bikeable, walkable communities where there's easy access to transit. This is really all in the spirit and intent of achieving the city's mode share goals that are outlined in the city's climate action plan. As many of you know, we are also preparing underway with community plan updates, specifically University, Mira Mesa, and the Hillcrest Focus Plan Amendment. And those community plan updates will also be covered through the Blueprint San Diego Environmental Impact Report.
very good. And somewhat similar, I know there's a question about, well, I apologize. Actually, let me pause for a moment. I wanted to acknowledge, I see 3 virtual hands raised. I wanted to acknowledge them. Let's go to the audio, as they say. I see, and I'll take them in this order, and my colleagues will help to unmute you at that time so you can speak. We'll start with Madison Coleman, followed by Louis Rodolico, I apologize, and then Jesse O'Sullivan. So Madison, go ahead. What's your comment or question?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Awesome. Madison Coleman, policy advocate with Climate Action Campaign. Thank you for hosting this meeting today. As you all know, and was sort of mentioned, the city cannot meet its CAP mode share target goals if each CPU fails to meet its own. There are a few CPOs that weren't mentioned in the preparation notice that are currently in the process of updating. That's Claremont, Barrio Logan, and College Area. And then there's 2 CPUs that that have already been adopted, Mission Valley and Kearny Mesa. And so I'm asking or wondering if those CPUs, especially the CPUs that are in the process of updating, will be affected, if any, by Blueprint SD. Thank you.
Thanks, Madison. The ones that you mentioned, Barrio and Claremont, that environmental review process for each of those, because they started a little bit sooner, has already been kicked off. And so we are preparing separate documents for those. They still will be informed by the information that we obtain through the development of the thresholds to achieve the mode share goals, although not specifically analyzed within the Blueprint San Diego project itself. And then Madison, I don't know if you want to come off mute because I think you had another question that I don't quite remember from that.
Sure. Am I still?
Yeah, we can
Yes,
hear
go
you.
ahead.
Okay. Yeah, there was the second one about the two CPUs that have already been adopted, which are Mission Valley and Kearney Mesa. Will they be affected? I know they have already gone through the process of, obviously being adopted and had their own EIRs conducted, but will they be affected?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. So, directly, they would not be affected because they've been recently approved. But, as they kind of go into the trove of community plans that have been updated over, the past, year, 2, 3, 5, 10, Blueprint San Diego will be identifying these land use intensities throughout the city. And so that can be used to inform the update, the re-update of those community plans going into the future.
Great, thank you.
Great, thank you, Madison. And then Lewis, thanks for waiting. We're gonna unmute you here, Lewis. Stand by 1 second. Stand by, Lewis. I think we're.
Hey, Lewis, we've unmuted you or given you the permission to unmute, but you're gonna have to come off of mute on your end.
Lewis, we'll come back to you. Let's go ahead to Joey, if we can have Jesse O'Sullivan give it a shot. Jesse, you should be able to unmute yourself. Go ahead, Jesse.
Hi, this is Jesse O'Sullivan. I'm Policy Counsel with Circulate San Diego. And first, I just wanted to say that I'm really glad the city's taking the housing situation seriously and trying to add more density in neighborhoods. I expect that we'll like the final plan here for Blueprint. And then as far as the EIR scoping, I know environmental impact reports tend to be designed to tell you all the bad things that will happen if something's done. But I want to make sure that the EIR should consider the bad things that'll happen if we don't go through with this plan, in terms of climate, in terms of air pollution, in terms of the likelihood that instead of new developments being built in the city of San Diego, they'll be built outside the city of San Diego, and there will be more people commuting in, longer commute times, worse traffic, more air pollution, worse for the climate, all that kind of thing. Not to mention affordability. I'm not sure that's something that goes in an EIR. But yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Jesse. I can briefly respond to that. So you're right. The purpose of the environmental impact report is to focus on the adverse environmental impacts that a proposal may have. However, the environmental impact report also includes an alternatives analysis, which includes the no project alternative, which explains the potential impacts to the environment if the project is not adopted. So I think that speaks to that. The EIR doesn't look at the affordability of housing as an environmental impact report, but that's something that would be approved through the statement of overriding considerations if significant and unavoidable impacts are determined throughout the environmental impact report process.
Great, thank you.
All right, thank you. And I think we have, let's see, I do want to come back to, I think that speaks to the other gentleman. I apologize. We were trying to have come off mute and he's either signed off or we'll look for your virtual hand again, as the case may be. So,
and just seeing a couple of other questions related to related to project objectives for Blueprint San Diego. Those will be included in the project description of the environmental impact report. And when the draft environmental impact report is available for public review, we will issue what's called a notice of availability of a draft environmental impact report, which will trigger the beginning of that 45-day public review comment period on that report.
Very good. All right, so let's see. Thank you. So thanks for the questions that have been coming in. Some are some I think our staff are looking closely at. I know Heidi's been able to answer some with the information she has at her fingertips for now, at least. And again, I do want to stress for everybody that all questions submitted will be documented with response, and it will at least be considered in the context of what additional the topics to be studied in the environmental review, so which is the focus of this meeting. So thank you for that.
Sorry,
yeah, go ahead, Heidi.
Sorry, Andy, just seeing a couple other ones related to green infrastructure, climate resiliency. These are all something that would be incorporated into individual community plans as they move forward. And then I'll just also randomly put out a plug that the department is also currently developing a climate resiliency and adaptation plan as well.
Interesting. Oh, thank you. Yeah, so many, as a side note, many people are familiar with climate action, the city's climate action plan and that effort, but the city is also in process on a climate resiliency plan. Is that correct? So this is what you were referring to? Okay,
yeah.
Great. Good. Thank you. Good. So just doing a little, by the way, for everybody's benefit on the screen share here, doing a little reflection on the questions that have come in. Our team's also doing translation into Spanish language in real time as quickly as they can keep up for everyone's benefit there. So again, do note that we're receiving these comments. Again, we don't anticipate we'll be able to answer every question today during this session, but again, we will be responding to and acknowledging those questions to the extent possible as part of the documentation of this entire scoping process during this period. So thank you again for that. And then here in blue on screen here are more of just your specific comments related to these projects, specific projects or topics to be studied in the environmental review. So thank you again for that. Good. So with that, we're
and
doing.
Then Andy, just in general, I'm looking through the comments and there's a lot of comments asking, will the environmental impact report consider greenhouse gas emissions? Again, exactly the type of comments that we're soliciting through this meeting. So thank you very much for those. I see other ones related to visual impacts. So these are the types of comments that we're looking to hear. So again, thank you for those comments as well.
Right, very good. All right. So, and I'll put back up on screen just again for purpose of making sure everyone's clear on how to submit their comments. Now, again, for today's purposes, again, through the chat is great. Thank you all again so much for working with the format. We really appreciate it. Again, anyone who's struggling with that, I do see another hand raised, and I'm going to go to that shortly over audio. You're welcome to raise your Zoom virtual hand to do that, and then we can call upon you. So in a moment, I'm going to call upon David Moti. Forgive me if I'm mispronouncing that. And we'll have David speak over the audio here. So David, I think you can unmute yourself now. Go ahead, David.
All right, thank you very much. I'm David Moti, and you did pronounce it correctly. My question is a more basic one because I'm not a CEQA attorney or EIR drafter, but this EIR, would it then be the EIR that applies to all community plan updates as they begin their plan update process? So essentially the EIR is prepared before the plan update process begins.
Hi, David. Thank you for the question. So it's not the EIR, necessarily for each plan update. We do anticipate that we will be able to use the information in this environmental impact report to be able to conduct the necessary environmental review for future community plan updates as well. It's possible that future community plan updates could tier or addend off of this environmental impact report, but the specific analysis for each future community plan update would be determined at the time that we are conducting that effort.
So maybe it's more like a base, and then you will, during the plan update process, build another sort of structure upon this base of this EIR.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yep, thank you, David. And then Ms. Carolyn Chase, I see your virtual hand up, and I want to acknowledge I happened to notice that you've been submitting comments too through the chat, so thank you for that. Carolyn, I think you're open. Go ahead.
I did. Thank you. How is this different from how current recent community planning updates have been increasing density around transit? We're already been doing transit-oriented density, and when were the project goals set and by who? Thank you.
Hi, Carolyn.
Hi.
The project objectives are something that are identified within the project description of the draft environmental impact report. So that's something that we'll be working on as we move forward with the project. Again, we issue the notice of preparation at the earliest time possible for the project. And so this is really an opportunity to gain public feedback on the contents in the environmental impact report, as well as on the project itself. As far as your question about how is it different from other community plan updates, each of the community plan updates we do anticipate will go through our public involvement process so that we have community input on the specifics for each particular community. But one of the things that we are excited to be working on is to look at our city comprehensively to determine appropriate land use intensities throughout the city to meet our housing as well as our climate goals.
Okay, very good.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Carolyn.
Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you, Heidi. And Kay Neal, as shown on your Zoom identifier, I'll go ahead and open up the audio for you. I see your virtual hand there. Okay.
Thank you. My question is this rather rushed schedule for this EIR due to the fact that you're trying to consume LEAP funds before they are the expiration date of those, the funds have to be expended? Thank you.
We did obtain funding through the LEAP grant funds to fund some of the community plan updates, as well as portions of the preparation of this environmental impact report. The schedule that Andy went over on our meeting is an estimated schedule. It's dependent on community input, but it is representative of a standard time for the completion of a citywide programmatic environmental impact report.
Very good. Thank you. And then thank you. And then Deborah Knight, we'll go ahead and unmute you in just a few seconds here. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you. Thank you very much, Heidi. I am involved with the University Community Plan update, and I am gravely concerned about the timing of what gets done as a result of the plan update. And it's become pretty clear to me that the minute the plan is updated at the stroke of a pen, there will be huge new development entitlements given to people, to property owners, and that will happen immediately at the stroke of a pen. What's totally unclear to me is that all the promises, such as major bike infrastructure, we have put in the plan, probably $50 to $100 million worth of bike infrastructure. And I'm wondering, when will that happen? Will that happen 15 years after you've already, increased all this development intensity? And also, how will that be paid for? Because I've asked about the DIF fees, and I've gotten like a little tap dancing, like, well, we might take some of the DIF fees and put them in a citywide fee. So if we don't get the DIF fees, and how are we going to build the bike infrastructure? And how is the timing for those kinds of things to meet the climate action plan going to mesh with the immediate development increase entitlements that will be immediate? Thank you.
Thanks, Debbie. Nice to hear from you. I hope that we can meet again soon too, because I think it will be helpful for us to talk offline, and we can also meet with Katie as well. But just want to clarify that the environmental impact report for the Blueprint San Diego program wouldn't approve any particular development to occur. It's rather a tool that analyzes the impacts of whatever else is adopted. So what's most important in terms of development, future growth within the new university community plan area or in any of the other community plan areas will be what goes into the plan itself. But Debbie, I'm always happy to meet with you offline as well.
Thank you.
All right, very good. Thank you. So it looks like we're caught up on our folks who want to speak over audio for now. So thank you for that. Heidi, any other kind of additional questions that have been submitted that you're able to kind of speak to today that have come in so far? I know, not to put you on the spot, I know one that's coming relatively recently is the question of how transit priority areas are defined. And I suppose there's a working definition, if not a formalized definition. And of course, in the EIR, it's of course formalized by then. Is that correct?
Yeah, transit priority areas are defined in both the San Diego Municipal Code as well as in the Public Resources Code, specifically in section 21099. What we talk about when we talk about transit priority areas in sort of layman's, more easy to understand terms, is within a half mile of high quality transit. Right now, we do have maps that show what those areas are, but we do anticipate those will change as we move into the future, especially as we work with SANDAG, our San Diego Regional Planning Agency, to plan for more transit investments throughout the region to increase the mode share of transit users. And so we do expect that the transit priority areas will change with time.
Okay, very good. Right.
I'll just, a couple of other comments. I see a lot of comments about infrastructure and the need to address infrastructure commensurate with housing, which we in the planning department are very keenly aware of the need to pair those two planning efforts. Again, as I mentioned, for each of the community plan efforts, we have assigned specific infrastructure planners so that we can ensure through the planning process the identification of the needed public facilities for the planned growth, as well as existing development throughout the community. There's a couple of questions is what is the minimum transit ridership needed to meet the mode share goals? That's a really great comment. And that's something that we will be working with our team as well as our consultant team through the funding that we received from the state to be able to identify the types of land uses necessary to achieve the transit ridership to meet our mode share goals.
Very good. Thank you. And I know there's been some, and I believe it came up in a previous conversation or question about how is this different from the Complete Communities initiative? And I believe there's some, maybe Heidi, is there a kind of a quick or relatively simple way of describing those differences?
Yeah, it's a completely separate initiative from Complete Communities initiative. Last November, I'm sure many of you are aware, the City Council adopted the Complete Communities Mobility Choices as well as Housing Solutions Program. Most people associate that mostly with the Housing Solutions Program, which was an opt-in optional density bonus program throughout transit priority areas within the city to serve as an implementation tool to achieve the planned densities that we have planned through our existing community plans. That is an opt-in only program, but did not provide a framework for a comprehensive review of the intensities needed to achieve our mode share goals as outlined in our climate action plan.
Right.
So it's separate, but built upon each of the initiatives.
Very good. Heidi, I want to go back to, we have a few more people who've come back to raising their virtual hands. So I see Luis Rodolico. Let's try for you again if we can. We're going to unmute you. Now, if you can unmute yourself. There you go.
Okay, that should do it. I got bounced out last time. I want to thank Planning and City Council over the years for making ADUs more available. We built a companion unit for my parents, and you guys have done a really good job. And you always get negative, that's something positive. Now, on the other hand, when we look at the carbon footprint and things like that we're doing here in San Diego, here in South University, we originally had 3 major roads planned. And the local mall decided if those roads weren't built, if 2 roads weren't built, the traffic would remain higher next to Westfield Mall and they could keep their rents high. So they went under the cover with dark money and paid a lot of lobbyists, some I see are present here today, to make sure those roads were not built. But that raises our carbon footprint. We have to drive miles all around. There's poor egress in the event of a conflagration. We're raising our carbon footprint, et cetera. And conservancy groups and environmental groups say, well, we don't really need the roads. We're okay with them. Yet when you go to other projects, like for example, the Middletown project and Gwinnett Valley project, conservancy groups are saying, well, there aren't enough roads. It isn't safe for people to leave. We should not build this project. So city planning really has to take the position that we need to complete our planned road system for conflagration egress, to protect our public safety people, to make sure that we're driving fewer miles and are putting less carbon in the air. And like I said, this has been an ongoing problem at South University. And it's really tragic that Dan Monroe and now Katie Witherspoon are taking a position that those of us that think these roads should be built are somehow out of the picture. But the bottom line is we didn't get a vote. 2/3 of the community that wants these roads built are banned from the planning group. And Dan Monroe, Katie Witherspoon, all the planners have made sure none of us from East UC, Southeast UC are ever on the planning group. And that's important. This should have gone to the voters. It did not. It went through Dark Money, Westfield Mall, Sherry Lightner, and crew, and they should be ashamed of themselves. We have to complete our road system if we're really serious about lowering carbon. Thank you.
Thank you, Louis. Good. I also see Jeff Huter, if I'm pronouncing that right. Jeff, will try and unmute you here. You should be able to unmute yourself now.
Great. This is Jeff Huter. Thanks for taking the time today. My question is about TPAs, and I keep seeing this supposed definition of a TPA as being within a half mile of transit, but mathematically that's not a definition. So how is it in saying, go look at the GIS map? The GIS map is an implicit definition of distance, of some sort of projection onto a plane and measurement and Euclidean distance. The law doesn't actually say that's the measurement of distance. So where are you getting a measurement of distance? Because frankly, the only measurement that makes any sense whatsoever if you're trying to do transit-oriented development is how far it takes somebody to walk to a bus stop on safe sidewalks. That's an easily discernible amount. I get that it's easy for somebody building a GIS map to draw circles, but that isn't the viable standard, and it's not actually defined in the law, and it's not defined in this off-cited 21099 either. There's no definition that I've found for how you measure distance to transit. So maybe you could answer that.
Yeah, there's no state law requirement on how the distance is measured. And there are different ways that we could look at and appreciate the feedback on that.
Okay, great. So, but let me finish up. So if there's no state standard on how it's measured, your ADU code, for example, can't be applied to transit density because you haven't defined a measurement of distance. So at this point, your bonus density in your ADU code is invalid.
All right, thank you.
We can follow up offline. Because
that'd be great, because this is a really important question and one that I don't think anybody's understood until today.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hugh. Appreciate that. And again, it just is a bigger picture reminder for everybody. In terms of the context of today's meeting, Heidi with some support from staff behind the scenes. Again, answering what we can today that they feel they can with some sort of level of response with the information at hand. But otherwise, again, more formally, we'll be having a response as part of the documentation of the entire scoping process that we'll be going on through August 18th, again, to collect input and requests for it should be studied as part of this environmental impact report. So these considerations for everything been brought up so far over audio through the chat is being recorded as part of that. So we appreciate your understanding of that. If you maybe don't get a very clear, direct answer to any questions you've offered today, please, we thank you for your patience on that and look forward to receiving that as part of the documentation of the entire scoping process. So, and again, just to remind that this 2-hour meeting is certainly not the only time to be able to submit those comments. Before we wrap up again today, we'll make sure you have the information. In fact, in a moment, I'll put back on the screen a reminder about those how to submit written comments formally into this process, which I'm pasting up here right now. Again, everything you submitted in the chat or over audio, we'd appreciate getting that either by email or by good old-fashioned regular mail to the information you see on screens.
Andy, can we
Yeah,
unmute
please.
Debbie Knight again? She
Yes.
indicated that she had raised her hand again.
Yes, Debbie, I thank you. Thanks for your patience, Debbie. I wanted to just take the opportunity to remind
Yeah,
folks about
no,
that.
this
so.
is quick. Same question as Jeff had, which is, we've tried to raise this with the city. The transit priority, the half mile, I appreciate that. That's a good measurement, you know, a good way to do planning. But somebody took a flat map and used their computer to draw circles, and we are not a flat city. We have huge canyons, and we have a transit priority area in our plan update that we've not been able to get them to change. It's a mile and a half to walk. You can, unless you're a crow or have, you know, a jetpack, you are a mile and a half from, or 1.6 miles from a good transit rather than half a mile. And it's really important to make this, not make it kind of a silly or a unrealistic thing, you know. So, and I've heard from somebody the other day in Talmadge or something, same issue, which is, so the city needs to clarify that the half mile is a half mile that you actually can walk or bike and not fly.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Debbie. And yeah, that's something that we'll also be working with our consultant on as we develop what the thresholds are throughout the city within those transit priority areas. And that's something that would be taken into consideration is the true walk.
That would be great. And we'd like that in our plan update, because after more than 2.5 years, we haven't been able to get them to just change that definition. So thank you.
Yeah. So thank you for the comment. Thank you.
Good, very good. Heidi, I'll let you, I think in a moment, Louis, I see wants to come back on with some more audio coming. Just a moment, Louis, we'll bring you back here for audio, comments over audio, I should say. I did note a question in the chat about all of these comments being made available. And I do want to stress that again, during the entire scoping process up to August 18th, all that will be compiled and documented and made available to the broader public. So the commentary is not just in this 2-hour meeting, so but more collectively across that period. So do rest assured that'll be available. So with that, I do want to, we'll come back to Louis. We're going to unmute you, Louis, here, and go ahead and unmute yourself. And can you unmute yourself, Louis? I know you were having a challenge with that back the first time.
While we wait for that, Andy, there was
go
another
ahead.
question that said, what equity impacts be included into the EIR?
Mm-hmm.
They're not necessarily included into the environmental impact report under the California Environmental Quality Act requirements, but it is definitely something that we include in each of our planning initiatives. And one of the primary purposes of Blueprint San Diego overall, which is to make sure that we consider equity in planning for our housing, so that we can be providing for housing for everyone of all income levels across the city. So thank you for that question.
Great. Very good. All right, Louis, let's try it again. Can you unmute yourself? I know you're able to do it once before. No. All right, Louis, go ahead and keep trying to unmute yourself if you can. Heidi, any other, all the comments and questions, sorry, of the questions received today, anything else you've been able to look through that you're able to give some answer, an interim answer for now, I should say, as part of a response for today?
Yeah, so I'm also seeing comments related to sea level rise, which, as I mentioned earlier, we are addressing sea level rise through our comprehensive citywide climate resiliency and adaptation plan, but also something that we consider through the planning process when we move forward with our community plan updates as well.
Great. So just another kind of process check as part of our documentation. Thank you again for all the questions here. And I know it's not readable. I'm just, those of you who are looking at the screen share, I've kind of scanned back on the digital whiteboard just to kind of show you that breadth of comments that have come in, questions and comments that have come in. And want to thank our team for the simultaneous translation as well. It's really important. So just kind of scanning over everybody, you can kind of take a look and see the types of questions that have been coming in. So Lewis, I think you're live. Can you hear us, Lewis? You should be unmuted. You should be able to speak. But we're still not hearing you. Oh, I think we lost him again. Oh, sorry, Lewis. I think he's having some connectivity issues. All right, we'll look for Lewis to come back if he wants to try and come back over audio. But again, it says Zoom is an amazing tool, right? Particularly since the pandemic. But again, and we'll get this information to you again. I want to stress for everybody, sending your comments and questions over email, over good old-fashioned postal mail. We really just thank you in advance for doing that, in addition to what you've submitted through the chat and over the audio. That's really important, just to make sure we've captured every single comment and question with that. So good. Heidi, any other questions you've seen here that you're able to kind of give at least a brief response for now, pending a more full detailed response?
Yeah, a couple of other questions came in about greenhouse gas emissions. That's something that will go into the analysis of the environmental impact report. But also, again, thank you for sharing that, exactly the type of feedback that we're looking for out of this hearing. Just reading a couple of more relating to consistency with the city's climate action plan as well. That is part of our city's adopted significance thresholds. So thank you for that comment as well.
Good, very good.
Oh, I just saw another one asking about the VMT, or vehicle miles traveled, impacts of rideshare. That's also something, thank you for that feedback, that we'll consider when we're developing the report.
Okay, very good. Good. Okay, we're going to try one more time with Lewis. Again, go ahead and try to unmute yourself. Okay, go ahead, Lewis.
Okay, apparently I have an unstable connection.
Oh, we can hear you now. Go ahead.
Listen, this whole thing with the half-mile distance, this has been going on for like a couple of years now. The Planning Commission apparently has one view. City council members have another. We really have to give developers, neighborhoods, everyone a solid answer, and it should be based on a pedestrian path. And I don't know what the holdup is. I mean, if we got to make it 3/4 of a mile, fine, but this thing just really needs to be addressed. We need some stability. We need an answer on this as soon as possible.
Okay. Understood. Thank you. And I know you, Mr. Huter, and I think Ms. Knight have certainly weighed into that too. So we appreciate that. Thank you for emphasizing that. Good. Heidi, any other kind of specific questions that have been submitted you're able to respond to today, just as an informal initial response?
Yeah, I just saw another comment come in about community-specific supplemental development regulations, urban design. Those are things that would be refined through the community plan process. We are looking to, as part of Blueprint San Diego, also develop citywide objective design criteria as well. But then we'll be looking for further refined community input through each of the community plan updates to be sure that those are tailored to the needs of the individual communities.
Great. Okay, excellent. Good. So so we appreciate all the comments continuing to come in, and again, thank you all for working with the format here. Just as a process check, as we scheduled to go as late as 2 o'clock, and we're certainly happy to do that as long as we see comments and questions coming in. We're at least capturing them as we committed to today as part of the requirements for this scoping meeting. And again, as Heidi's able to, with the support of her team behind the scenes, offering any initial tentative answers over audio as she's been doing, pending the full documentation of the scoping process. So I want to thank Heidi and the team for doing that here. Always sometimes tricky to come up with answers on the fly to some challenging, complex questions at times. So but thank you all for continuing to submit these questions and comments that we're capturing. So okay, good. And I also want to stress too that for those of you again who've made time to be here, we really appreciate this. And again, you've hopefully received, and I'm actually going to switch the screen share. I'm going to, as a reminder about where you can, how you can and where you can submit comments. And let me switch to that. And I'm also going to check in a moment with our interpreter, Carmen Chavez, to see if we've had any questions or comments coming in through on our Spanish audio channel. So Carmen, if you're able to, is there anything that's come in through questions or comments on that through there? Or do you have a question or any clarification? We'll give Carmen a few seconds to possibly come over from the Spanish audio side to the English audio side. All right, well, I know she's been able to hear me, so she'll chime in if and when she needs to. So good, so let's see. And again, thanks for comments such as, for instance, just one that just came in over the chat about neighborhood bike cages, storage units, locking and safety facilities overnight. That's really helpful, specific requests for what the environmental impact report should study closely. So thank you for those details. Yes, and we're going to come back to the audio, and Debbie Knight, I see you back here. We're going to unmute you. Okay, Debbie, go ahead and unmute. There you go.
Yeah, following up on the mode share question. So we had a recent development approved in University City, and the mode share projection was abysmal. And there's no safe way to bike anywhere near this development. So my question is we were nowhere close to the 2020 mode share. So how are you going to prioritize, say, bike infrastructure or something that will actually, besides transit, that will actually, get us even to the 2020 mode share, which we are far from achieving. And I know how expensive bike infrastructure is, but if you don't do that, then you might as well just, for a dense area with high traffic like ours, you might as well just forget bike mode share if you don't build the infrastructure for people to actually, be alive when they get there.
Thank you, Debbie.
Yes, Debbie. So yes, it's not only about providing the land uses to support it, but the commensurate investment in infrastructure as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, very good.
I just saw a couple of more impacts about potential impacts from loss of parking. Again, great comments for the scope of the EIR. Also another comment about changes in seismic and earthquake impacts. So thank you for that.
Very good.
And then Andy, I just wanted to jump in. I saw a question about working with community groups and soliciting input. And I just want to make sure everyone's aware that we will be holding additional workshops and other opportunities for folks to comment. The CEQA document isn't the only way to participate in the development of Blueprint. And I encourage folks to go to the Blueprint website to keep up to date on meetings and community outreach that's occurring for the entire process.
Absolutely. Thank you, Seth. Great reminder. And for those who haven't found that link yet or taken that link, we're going to put it in the chat again. And within the next minute, you should see it pop in. One of our team members will do that. And I can even, let's see, why don't I even put that on screen here? So, so again, to Seth's point, and there you go. Thank you, Joey. Joey's just put in the chat all the links to all the individual all the specific projects that are going into this EIR to take deeper dives and learn more about the details of those emerging plans. But to Seth's point, particularly with Blueprint, there are additional upcoming meetings coming up to engage in Blueprint in particular. So encourage all of you to attend. Please do share. Those of you closely connected or are part of community planning groups, please continue to share that. I know your planning staff assigned to those will continue to help put the word out. We always appreciate all help in getting the word out, whether formally or informally, grassroots and otherwise. So thank you for that. So good. Heidi, any kind of additional reflections? And I see a couple more. I'll go back to the audio in just a couple minutes, but Heidi, anything you at the moment you wanted to respond to that you've seen coming in?
Nothing in particular. I do see some additional comments about things to be analyzed, and Again, thank you for that. A lot of times we have scoping meetings and, there's a lot of focus on the projects, which is also important. So it's nice to also see people thinking about the environment and the types of environmental effects that we should be analyzing in the EIR. So thank you for that.
Very good. Thank you. So we'll come back to audio. I see a couple of hands. I see the hand of the Mira Mesa Town Council. And if you don't mind, in just a few seconds, we're going to unmute you. And if you don't mind, maybe introducing yourself. And you should be able to unmute yourself now. Mira Mesa Town Council.
Yes, I'm sorry. That should have come through with my name, but sometimes with Zoom, because I use a town council account, it comes through as town council. So I'm Jeff Stevens. I'm actually chair of the Mira Mesa Community Planning Group. I did put some comments in the chat, but my main concern is that the purpose of Blueprint seems to be to speed up the community plan changes so that housing can be built faster. But what concerns me is that you need public facilities to go along with that, the parks, libraries, fire stations, and so on. And you need a good transit system if you're going to have that kind of density. Mira Mesa Boulevard, for example, is defined as a major transit corridor, but there's very little transit on Mira Mesa Boulevard, very few places that you can get to with it. So it requires a dramatic improvement in order to really support this kind of housing. So there are really two problems here I think the EIR should address. In addition to those simply existing, it takes time to plan these, the public facilities and the transit. Given that this is intended to speed things up, will that time be adequate? And will the EIR address what happens if the housing is built before the planning is complete? And the second thing that's required is funding. Without the money to pay for a much better transit system and the public facilities, once they're planned, then they won't occur. So the EIR also should estimate the funding needed to provide the public facilities and the transit and evaluate the impact if the funding turns out to be inadequate.
Thank you for your comments.
All right, thank you. And then Louis, we'll go ahead and try and unmute you again. Louis, go ahead and unmute yourself.
I was at the last plan update in university. They were doing, it was a couple of months ago, they were doing trails and canyons and things like that. And they had a map showing an awful lot of trails being removed and only like one maybe being added. There seems to be this goal of making the open space parks like private reserves. And also there's been no improvement. Friends of Rose Canyon's had $500,000 for years, but they've made no improvement to the safety of any of these entries, and neither has the city. Is the city really planning to turn these into private preserves? Because that seems to be the direction it's taken.
All right, thank you, Louis. And again, to the extent staff have more specific concrete answers for you today to specific questions, they will chime in over audio today to be able to do that. Otherwise, we're at minimum recording those questions and we'll have a more detailed answer for you as part of the documentation of the scoping process. So thank you all for working with that. Very good. So again, we're doing well on time. We're scheduled to conduct this meeting as late as 2 p.m. But I do want to stress with folks, we understand if not everyone's able to stay the entire time. And if you haven't already submitted comments and questions, again, we do stress while this session is helpful to be able to hear from each other and receive comments, the city does very much still want to receive those through these additional channels. So specifically over email, and I'll switch my screen share here just to confirm that, through email at the address you see here, and that is in the chat already. We posted a few times, but of course, by good old fashioned mail as well to the address you see on screen. So do want to, again, thank you for your diligence in getting comments to the city through these methods. It's really helpful and important to the process. So very good. So again, we're scanning over questions, seeing what we can do today to provide some level of response where we can with the information available. But again, want to stress this is mostly about hearing from you and collecting input about topics to be studied in the environmental impact report. So good. I don't think we have any more audio comments right now. So Heidi, any other specific topics or reflections on some of the topics that people have submitted and asked to be studied? I know you've mentioned the greenhouse gas, of course, TPAs we've talked about a lot. But anyway, any other kind of reflections there?
Yeah, I just saw a couple more come in regarding VMT or vehicle miles traveled impacts, which would be included within the environmental impact report. So thank you for that comment. Also addressing pedestrian safety as well. So thank you for that. There is a comment of whether or not this scoping meeting can be recorded and made available. And I believe that it is being recorded, so we can follow up and make that available as well.
That's right. Yes, we are recording this right now, so we can make it available. Absolutely. Thank you. Good. All right. So, and again, just as a reflection, I think if I'm properly screen sharing here, just again, wanted to remind you, for those of you who may have missed it, we're one of the ways we're kind of as a backup way of recording comments and questions that have come in is through this digital whiteboard, as we call it. So our team has been diligently taking things out of the chat, everything in the chat, and placing them onto the whiteboard as it is. And that's just helping us to make sure we've captured those, just sharing those with you. And then from there, we'll be able to make sure we've captured all the details out of this session. So
there was just a comment here that it's a little bit hard to read, all these panels up on the screen here,
right.
Andy. And so what we can do afterwards is we can take this screen and print it and include it with our scoping plan, scoping meeting comments.
Absolutely. Yes, we'll do that. Thank you. I appreciate that. I saw that too. Yeah, I appreciate everyone's flexibility and difficulty for reading any details. So Heidi's absolutely right. We'll make sure we produce this as part of the documentation of the meeting overall. So good. Excellent. So Heidi, any other kind of reflections or responses to any questions you're able to provide today for now, at least?
Let's see, there was another one that came in about ensuring consistency with the city's climate action plan. Thank you for that comment. That is one of the primary purposes of the Blueprint San Diego program, is to ensure that as we plan our land uses throughout the city, that we are achieving the goals in our climate action plan. So thank you for that.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. And again, just as I'm scrolling through the the digital whiteboard, again, everybody gets a sense of the the level of details and commentaries. Some have been very specific to topics to study. Others have been other commentary things such as on the land development code. I've seen some bigger ones on kind of concern just about growth patterns and impacts to water, of course, emissions. So all certainly important topics we all continue to grapple with in general with planning. So, and again, a lot of commentary, some commentary, I should say, here and there about how city staff can continue to work with the community at large, the planning groups, through processes like these. So thank you. Sometimes a little bit formally off topic from CEQA as it is, but we're still, of course, capturing all of that and recording that. So thank you for that. Very good. So Heidi, any other kind of specific reflections, comments or kind of topics that you've seen specifically you wanted to highlight?
I'm not seeing anything in particular. Again, I know that there's just a lot of comments in the chat. And so since we have these displayed on the screen, that's something that we will be including as part of our record and reviewing as we prepare the environmental impact report for Blueprint San Diego.
Yeah, very good. Okay. Very good. So let's see, I think so my sense is we've certainly received received a lot of comments and questions specific to questions. I think it may be that we've received all of the questions we're going to receive today by those of you who are participating in this scoping meeting. So we may be getting close to a point where we could potentially end the meeting early. So I want to just kind of give a request to everybody, if you have not submitted a specific question that you wanted to include as part of the record for today, and most importantly, a comment or 2 or 3 about topics you'd like to make sure are studied in the environmental impact report, which is the primary reason for our meeting today, please go ahead and submit those now. That'd be really helpful for us. But I will again reflect on, you're all probably familiar with it now. Arguably the most important way to submit comments and is most helpful to the city is to do so again by email to the address on screen here or by mail. So even everything you've submitted today in the chat, for example, or said over the audio channel, we would greatly appreciate you doing that through these as well. That will help us to make sure we've captured everything as much as possible. So, so again, I see more coming in, such as recognizing the impacts to stormwater infrastructure, what we may be anticipating in the future with rain patterns and water flows, the sewage system, and those risks to public health, energy impacts overall related to the city's renewable energy plan goals, to the extent that this environmental impact report can assess those as well. So again, thank you for that. That's helpful for us to make sure we have a complete scope for the environmental analysis overall. But good, okay.
Andy, just want to clarify a question about whether or not any comments submitted today need to be re-inputted through the portal. The answer to that is no. We're collecting all the comments that we're receiving in the chat today, and we have those. They don't need to be re-inputted anywhere.
Okay, good clarification. Thank you, Seth. I appreciate that. Forgive me any confusion I've caused. Think of it at least as through the email and the mailing address listed here. Consider it then just redundancy to send them again to this information. If you've already submitted them in the chat or spoken over audio, consider them received. But don't be shy to resubmit as you like to the email address and the mailing address listed here on screen.
Yeah, and I just want to encourage everybody to submit their letters too, because I know that it can be hard to kind of at the ready type into the chat. So the most comprehensive way to provide your comments would be through submitting them to our email address, and happy to take slow mail as well too.
Yeah, if you have a stamp, remember stamps, postage stamps. So, good. So, and again, as we've said, plenty more detail to learn about each of the projects included in this environmental impact report. There's many links have been posted in the chat. You can scroll back up through the chat and find these links that you see on screen here as well. So, want to encourage you to do that and stay closely involved in those projects, as I know many of you clearly have been. Please do continue to stay closely involved. So, Heidi, any other specific thoughts, reflections on comments that have come in?
I don't have anything else. I do just want to thank everybody for their time. Oftentimes we hold scoping meetings for environmental impact reports, and our participation is not so great. And so I really want to thank everybody for bringing all of these topics to our attention so that we can consider these as we prepare the draft environmental impact report for Blueprint San Diego. And as always, I really appreciate everybody's time that participates in these meetings, whether it's your first time participating in one of the planning department's meetings, or if you are very familiar to us. It's nice to hear everybody again and see new people joining us as well. So thank you very much.
Great, very good. Good, I know, and again, to clarify questions about, and Heidi, maybe you can, let me come back to, Heidi, I'm going to put the process slide back up here because I think we'll be able to wrap up in a few minutes. So I know there was at least one question clarifying about, as we've been saying, we're packaging all these comments coming in today, but the entire scoping meeting. Can you give at least any rough, estimate, or if not a more firm date as to when all that will be packaged and then made available for the public to view?
Yeah, so what we typically do is we take all of the comments received during the public scoping period, which includes the comment letters that we've received so far and the comment letters that we received through August 18th, as well as the comments that the MIG team, Andy's team, has included within the documents that, the small blue bubbles on the screen. And so what we'll do is we will print those out. Well, maybe not hard copy, print them out, but we will save them together into one document, include that as an appendix in the draft environmental impact report that will be available again for public review. The planning department will distribute a notice of availability of that draft environmental impact report. And at that time, there will be another formal opportunity to comment on that draft environmental document once it has been prepared.
Thank you, Heidi, for that. Appreciate that. And I'll mention again, I'm putting the links back up just to also reference too that while Heidi's been our respondent today from the city staff and answering questions, through each of the the 4 projects, Blueprint, Mira Mesa University Community and Plan, and the Hillcrest Amendment, the city staff assigned to each of those projects can certainly help answer questions for you about the nature of what is or is not being studied in those processes, and how it may relate to the environmental impact process. So do encourage you to visit each of those pages. If you don't know those staff, there's information there about how to reach each of those staff members. So definitely want to encourage you to please do that and link into them closely. So
Andy, if I can also just a quick reminder, because I know this can be very confusing when we talk about the environmental impact review process and then the separate but related process for the project itself. And so we do want to remind everybody that when we talk about kind of these formal comment periods, that is just for the environmental impact report. There are also public hearings, and so the public process continues up until the final adoption hearing by the City Council. So we do look forward to working with the community, taking feedback on each of these initiatives, as well as the EIR throughout the process. It can seem, kind of very more boring and formal and less personal. That's because of the requirements laid out in the Public Resources Code for the formal public comment periods. But just a reminder that while the formal comment periods exist there, we are always available for questions and look forward to continuing to work with members of the public and the community groups through the process. And then also just a quick reminder that if you go to the links that were shown there for the community plan updates, as well as Blueprint San Diego, there's additional information regarding community workshops coming up. In particular for Blueprint San Diego, we have some workshops coming up at the end of September, and we hope to see many of you there as well.
Yeah, very good. All right, thank you, Heidi. Thank you, Seth, who came in to help out. And I think as everyone's here, you can kind of see we have various panelists who've been here. They've been helping behind the scenes, trying to gather, to the extent possible, immediate response where we could. But again, as we said, as Heidi just reflected on the process, we'll be packaging all this information received today and through the entire scoping process with that documentation to be made available to the public. So please continue to stay in touch with the project, and more of that information will become available soon. And so what I wanted to let you know is we're going to go ahead and wrap up for now, because I think we've got a lot of great volume information. We're going to be able to send the city staff back to get to work on collecting, packaging responses to these questions and starting to more formalize, put together the entire scoping package. Will be really important to do. There's a lot of work to do. But as we said here, as you can see on screen, please do stay in touch. If you think of additional topics later that you didn't get to share with us during this scoping meeting, this is how you can submit those by email or by postal mail to the city staff to have them included. And as we said, please do reach out directly to the planning staff responsible for each of the 4 projects: Blueprint, University City, Mira Mesa, and the Hillcrest Amendment opportunity. So I want to also thank Carmen Chavez, who's been working through the Spanish audio channel, providing simultaneous translation. So Carmen, thank you very much for doing that and your assistance in preparing for this today. I want to thank all the city staff who are here as well, my colleagues at MIG who've been working behind the scenes to capture the notes, taking everything out of the chat, making sure we're getting a lot of good documentation and redundancy of that documentation from today's meeting. And of course, most importantly, thank all of you for attending and being here taking time out of your day. And we appreciate you sharing this information with your communities, your colleagues, your neighbors and friends, letting them know how they can stay in touch and provide their comments, either both to the environmental review process, but also to the 4 projects directly as well. So we'll look forward to all of you staying informed, connected to the projects in that way. And I think with that, let me go ahead and formally say thank you. Finally say thank you. And we'll go ahead and sign off, and we'll close the webinar in about 1 minute. And thank you very much and have a great afternoon. We look forward to staying in touch.
Thank you, everybody.